this. And without further ado, let's move forward now. We're up now is Chris Welsh, who's hosting a discussion of creating an independent sports branding. He also has a special guest as well that we'll see shortly. So really looking forward to that. I'm going to bring on Chris now. Welcome, Chris, to PitchCon. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, hi, Mick. How are you, Mick Pulick?
I so deserve this. It's
let's for a minute before we talk about let's talk about branding for a minute, because there's lots of different type of branding. There's website branding, there's podcast branding.
Oh man,
there's also name branding. You've done a great job of Nick Pollock. Nick Pollock is new to the industry, by the way, because Picture List was the guy, and Nick, you developed yourself in. But what I've learned is my cohort, Scott Bogman, and myself, we're not good at branding our names because they're never right. And it was quite an amazing moment when I watched that amazing hype video. And Nick, I was the only one with the wrong name. It was the Welch. It was the grape soda. You made me into grape soda. Have I not branded my name right?
So I will say this. I like the fact that there might be something to be said about branding. Well, first of all, I should really say I am mortified once again for obvious reasons. But there is something kind of funny about this where I don't know, maybe messing up is helping. Maybe that's a good thing, right? It's
no, it 100% is. I would throw this to you. You and I got to become friends because of it, because I'm not respected in the industry, and Scott was the one that was invited to a very special thing. I wasn't, and the name was wrong, so I went in. But then here's what happened. You and I became great friends because you went along with a joke. The name became the name became a joke. We ran with it every time. We made it a punchline. We made it a bit. We've done great stuff. You've done podcasts with me. When I was doing some stuff with CBS, I brought you over to co-host with me.
Amazing.
And we have actually, this is exactly to your point. I'm being facetious about the whole thing. We have actually turned, and this is a very, very key point if we want to talk about the podcasting side. This is a key point of finding your bits and finding the things that you can roll with that are funny enough and are good. And you're right, it has become like a branding thing with us. And you went in my DMs, and I assumed, if people don't know what we're talking about, the amazing video that the crew over at Picture List made.
Josh Berry, really.
Yeah, which by the way, I really appreciated that I was like the 7th guard in the Wakanda army, and Yancey Eaton was Spider-Man. I just want to point that out. But not only was I the 7th guard in the Wakanda army, my name was wrong. And when I saw it, I immediately was like, well, this is a funny joke. Nick is running with the bit. That wasn't the case, and you got in my DMs about it, but it turned into fun.
I'm an honest man, and I like it. The second that I saent it, and it was already live, and I was like, "Oh God!" And I just went straight to you because I didn't want to. I could have played it off like that and whatever, but I should have. I couldn't. No, that's just not me. I can't do that.
I know. Well, it's a funny thing. I'm excited to be here.
I believe you're next to Jason Benetti, for what it's worth.
So we're both Wakanda Army.
It's true. But no, really, I called it the best mistake I ever made when I called Scott Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure, obviously, doing everything with you. And I'm going to give you the proper intro now. Chris Welsh is the co-host of the In This League podcast, Prospect One, and the Black Book podcast. Chris Welsh is a truly prospect wizard. You can check out the In This League podcast and, of course, their Patreon at patreon.com/ITLArmy. And of course, find Chris Welsh on Twitter at IsItTheWelsh. And of course, I can't thank you enough for everything that you've also done for Pitch List over the years. As you mentioned, bringing me onto the CBS podcast last year was one of the joys of my career thus far. So really, thank you so much for all of that.
Hey, man, you do a fantastic job. And I'm actually excited we get to talk just in a tiny bit because, Nick, when he presented PitchCon, which is an incredibly unique idea, and we were kind of going through stuff, and I've become more known, and this is part of also the branding thing too. I've become more known for my prospect prowess because it's an independent thing that I do, and that has really jumped in. But we were talking about what are some things that we could talk about here, and you had a lot of prospect panels, and I'm not on the I think there's one later today, and there was an awesome one yesterday. Good Lord. I hope people can go and rewatch the one. Yeah. The Trevor Huth and that one with the Alex Fado. And Scooble and Daniel Lynch was awesome. And that's what's so cool about this stuff. But, I was sitting here thinking, all right, well, what can I do? I could talk about prospects, but, I don't want to talk independently about it. I could talk about podcasting in general. Well, guess what? My buddy Scott Bogman later today with Bubba and Jeff Erickson are going to talk about why we podcast. So the other thing that I thought about in this, so thank you for the plug on prospects, was that, I have a radio background and I worked in radio since 2005. I was thinking about it. And one thing that I have done is I've built a brand, maybe not necessarily the most successful, but I have built, I built the ability to stick around and make it a worthwhile thing. And I thought this was a really good conversation we could have, because there's a lot of people left and right that are starting podcasts or starting websites, thinking about writing books, and they don't know where to start. And they also don't know how to balance the big dogs. I got to do some stuff with CBS and be a host for a while, and that's what some people want as a dream. But you got to also realize you can be independent and you can do this. So that's something I can speak to, and I'm looking forward to in just a little bit. You can come back and we can talk about. You're kind of one of the pillars of the three things that I think are important to talk about of what people can do independently. And I think Pitcher List, from a website perspective, is at the top of their game. So I'm gonna steal you back on there, Mick, to talk more about this.
Just clap your hands 3 times and I'll be here.
All right. Okay.
That's awesome. Should I bring on our next guest?
Yeah, coming on here is one of my dear friends in the industry. It's not Scott Bogman, who has actually been my best friend since I was a teenager, but this guy, we met on just kind of a random whim as well. If people remember the Dear Mr. Fantasy podcast with Chris McBrien, a dear friend of ours. You want to talk about an independent podcast? This is a shout out to McBrien. He was the original independent podcast, I believe. This is a guy that just decided to do a podcast. He did it right. He wasn't in it for money. He didn't want to make money. And maybe ultimately that, probably didn't help in maintaining it. But there was a point where he brought on a brand new co-host, and it was Mr. Joe Pisapia, who I got to be friends with, and we started a relationship, and then he's on Sirius XM and blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know it, we've been doing shows for 4 or 5 years. We do the Fantasy Black Book podcast now. I've written in his best-selling Fantasy Black Book. Joe Pisapia. Hi, buddy.
You've also written in my diary as well. You've written suggestions in there for me to make some life changes, all of the above. But this is great. I'm very excited to be here with you, my dear friend Welsh. And thanks to Nick doing a great job here for charity. Everybody knows I like to do a lot of charity stuff with the Black Book. We raised a lot of money last year, not just for Toys for Tots, but also for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. This is a great cause. So if you're watching this today, I want to get everybody out there and donate to the cause that Nick is putting out there. And Nick has done a great job. He is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. And that's why Welsh and I like to give him crap, because he's just so damn nice. And it's so easy. Like, you can just continue to push him and push him and push him. And I love him dearly. And it's great that he's given us this platform. And I think it's great for us to sit here and talk about independent brands, because it's kind of like, there's the big box stores in terms of fantasy sports.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
And I don't think there's a lot of I don't think people realize just how many other people are out there doing really good work that's, I would say, comparable, if not better. And they can do so a little bit more unfettered because they're not beholden to the ESPNs or the CBSs of the world. And I think that's actually in some ways an advantage, because you're kind of not locked in. And I'm excited to be a part of this, because I think you have built a very successful brand with ITL. I think that I've built a successful brand with Black Book, but I think we can both say it's not something that happened overnight.
No, it's not even remotely close to happening overnight. And so, the setup here, Joe, you said that all really great. Below you guys can, where's my camera? Below you guys can see the rallyup.com/pitcher list, and you guys could donate. It's a great cause, and we're glad to talk about this. And, there's a lot of different areas that we're going to go with this, but there's so many people out there that want their voice to be heard, that want to be a part of it. And, there's a bunch of moments that happen, like whether you're a fantasy player or you're just someone that loves sports, and you go out and you maybe either hear somebody do something and you say, well, I can do that, or this is something that I'm passionate about and I want to build it. But usually your basis is off of maybe like an ESPN, like you said, like an ESPN or a CBS, and that's kind of your baseline to it.
Right.
And people don't know quite where to go, but like you said, you don't realize that, you can do this on your own, but there are a lot of ways that you need to approach it. So as I was conceptualizing this, Joe, this was like a David versus Goliath conversation, because listen, the big companies, they are fantastic. And I have a unique perspective in this because, like, I don't get into all the work about it because it's probably inappropriate, but there was stuff with CBS last year that I was on, theoretically hired for a period of time to be a host on there. And I had a fantastic outreach from the industry when that was going on. People being like, congratulations, this, that, and the other thing. You know why that was? It was because it's kind of a dream for a lot of people.
Right.
That is a dream. People think, well, my pinnacle, my goal is to be on to CBS or to be on, Fantasy Focus or something like that, because those are the two things that are put ultimately in your face. And ultimately that didn't work out, but it's kind of a mutual thing, because I have put so much work into being consistent and being whatever successful necessarily is from like an independent brand. So that's what the conversation here is going to be. It's going to be,
but you know what, just to piggyback on that
yeah.
too, I think what we're kind of doing at the top here is let's bust some myths about some of the big boxes a little bit too, because although you could look at it and say, well, that's the goal and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if NFL Network came to me tomorrow and said, hey, you want to come move out to Los Angeles, I'd have to seriously think about that.
Sure.
Spoiler alert, that offer is not coming.
No,
but I don't think so anyway.
Oh, you're not going to take me with you. Take me with you.
I would take you with you. Be the first person.
Hey, I'm an independent brand, but get me the hell out of here. Give me the NFL Network. Give me the MLB Network.
I think what you learn for, I mean, I've worked for FanDuel directly when they had content, which was crazy. The amount of money that was flying through that place at the time back in 2015. And that experience was exhilarating and highly stressful to the point where it almost stopped being fun. And that was kind of a red flag. And then of course the big DFS, bubble burst at that time, and then slowly reinvented itself. But
that was a tough time.
But I also touched on for me personally too. In my personal life, was going through a huge transition in life, and it was kind of like, oh my God, I finally got to sell out. I've been working so hard, and now I'm selling out, kind of like you did in your story. And then you kind of get to that point, and you go, this is really not everything I thought it was going to be, and the expectations aren't realistic compared to what the demands are, and all these other things have to line up. So I just want to put out to everybody too that might have dreams to be in this industry and work for the Siriuses or, some of the bigger boxes out there that produce fantasy. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great goal, but don't be surprised if you get there and it might not be everything that you expected it to be, or necessarily how you dreamt it or as good as you wanted it to be as well. I think there's a little bit of dispelling of the rumors and the myth there about that. And sometimes doing you is the best thing you can do in the industry as well. So don't think that it's not an alternative, because it can be with the right things in place. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today, is what needs to be in place for that to work, because there's a lot of little pieces about that.
No, it's 100%, because most people aren't going to fulfill that dream, but that doesn't mean that you can't fulfill a dream of maybe working in baseball or fantasy baseball from a full-time perspective. I mean, you want to talk about even just going further to fantasy, something I do, very nice of Nick to plug, what I do with prospects, but I put myself, I wear a lot of hats, and I've always done that. And I'm a little bit manic about that, where I'm like, okay,
your hair looks so good today. I already
thank you. I'm having a fantastic hair day. I do agree.
Fantastic hair day. I'm
so
jealous.
Like little fade and stuff like that. But like, I'm manic about some of the things, like when in this league started, we were just started basketball and I just threw us in, and then we added baseball, and then we added football. And then down the line, prospects was a passion of mine. And I said, I'm going to do this. But I sat with the idea for such a long time and not going forward. And then finally, I just threw myself into it, and I figured out how to do it right. But you want to talk about other jobs in baseball that you can find. I've had friends, get jobs just being on the backfield and hustling and working and getting jobs with organizations. Everybody knows our industry-wide friend Jason Panini, got hired by the Twins. And, with the hard work, the opportunities are out there. But the key to what you just said is, with the low percentages being out there of you actually getting a gig with one of the big places, is you have to develop yourself, and you have to maybe develop your brand. And that's something to kind of go into. I want to ask you a couple of questions we can both go back and forth with, and then I want to talk about the keys, because the keys that we're going to talk about here as well are podcasting, publication, and websites, little PPW. And those are kind of the three main. Of course, there's a million other things. Picture List utilizes amazing guys that do artwork, and people are finding other gigs. But, those are the big ones that people are looking at. And if people have any questions, you guys can pop them up. Nick will have the questions and we can generate, and Joe and I can speak about it. But the first thing I'm curious about was like, what was the inspiration for you to want to jump into the industry? Like, we can just kind of burn through these. But like,
great.
Yeah. Because everybody here's got something, right. Whether it was like,
well, everybody starts the same way. Like, everybody starts with like, I love fantasy sports, I'm good at it. Yeah. So like,
or throw in Joe, like that, if that guy's doing it, like I could do it.
See, that was never me. I was never that guy's doing it thing. I was like, I like this, I want to do it. And I think that, wanting to be the best version of you is always better than wanting to be better than somebody else. I just think that's way, way healthier of an approach to take. But I think it starts off, most people start off in the analyst community as somebody who's really overly passionate about it. And then at the same time is spending way too much time on it and realizes, well, if I'm spending all this time and I'm having this success, I should be able to grow this success. And then you look out, and it's grown so much over the last decade. When I started about 10 years ago. It has grown so much over that period of time. It's really, this is the 10th year of the Black Book. Okay. So just for perspective, the first book that I wrote was because I was pissed off. I was working at a corporate job I hated, trying to support family stuff and things like that. And on the side, I was writing for some websites. It was one that I loved writing for, and it closed up because the guy had a third kid. And he's like, I can't do it anymore. And it was just for fun, but it was super exciting. I just liked doing it. It was like my outlet, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's like entry level one. Level one is, hey, I have a regular job and I love baseball or I love football or I love whatever it is, and I need an outlet for that. And you can find that outlet, and it's good. It's like, it balances you and it's fun. Then there's that next level where I found another site to work for, and they promised to hire me, quote unquote, to do all this work. I did it for a year. When it came time to payment, it equated to something of 10 cents per everything that I did. Let's just put it to you this way. The amount of work that I did should have been thousands and thousands of dollars, and it was not even 100. So it was pathetic.
But it's funny. Hold on. But what was the thing that pushed you to do it?
What pushed me. This is it.
Oh, well, I'm saying, was there like a person though too? Was it like, oh, I look at Matthew Bear? Okay.
No, okay. The person was me pushing myself to do it, which is I got stiffed and I said, man, why am I giving this away for free to other people and they could be profiting, and I don't realize that they're profiting off of me? And it's fascinating because the name of the site, I want to say, was called Fan Huddle. And it was basically the concept of what The Athletic is now, which is it was individual people covering teams, and I was in charge of fantasy overall, and they had writers for every team. It was this whole big thing, and I was in charge of all the fantasy content, and I had people working underneath me and all this stuff. And I remember getting stiffed on that, and I said, man, this is BS, man. You know what I'm going to do? If there was an inspiration, it was Bill James. I remember when Bill James put out his first book, I think 15 people read it or something like that. And I said, I see on Amazon, you could write a book and put it out there. I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this relative position value thing, the system that I use, and I'm going to put it out there in a book. And I said, maybe it'll sell 50 copies. I thought that was going to be cool. Like, I sold 50 copies. It'd be amazing. Oh my God, 50 copies of a book. And back then it was still Kindle only. There was no, tangible version like there is now, where a hard copy you could sell. And there was really nothing in the space at that time because it was still very new 10 years ago of fantasy content on Amazon. It really wasn't there. You had your rack magazines and all that stuff, but people going direct to consumer wasn't there. So there was actually it was kind of that thing that happened to Matthew Berry, Welsh, where it's like, if you're in the right place at the right time, sure, you can carve out a niche for yourself. And maybe I'm not the best at it. I mean, everyone could argue who's really good at whatever.
Well,
but in this case, I think I was in the right place at the right time, and being first there, it went to number one in the genre, and people liked it, had success. They came back, said, are you doing another one next year? And then that's 10 years later, here I am, and it's what I do for a living. It's crazy.
And I want to, and that is amazing. And that's part, and I want to dive into the publication. But one funny thing you said though, is like your Fan Huddle, like anybody who's been in this for like 5 years, we all have that. Bogman and I had that. It was Sports Porch. And it was just like,
why do everybody have these stupid names? Like
I know, we all have one of those. We all have one of those starts. But I mean, let quick hitter here. What was the thing prior? I didn't mean into the book. What's the thing that first pushed you? Because let me real quick, I'll tell you, I have a vivid memory of the thing that sparked Bogman and I to do it. And it was
tell me yours, because I've got mine. I want to hear yours. I talk for a lot.
It was petty-ish. Because I work kind of petty. But like,
there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm inventing it. The first thing is, I've had access to, you know, as a person in radio. Like I said, since 2005, I used to be into music recording. So since I was 16 years old.
And that's something you and I, it's very unique. You have a legitimate radio background. I have a legitimate professional acting background. I was a professional actor. I for years, I trained for classical theater at Oxford. I mean, I worked in the industry, not like, oh, you're a cute community theater actor. Like I worked in theater and film and television. And I think it's why you and I got along right away so well is because we were both natural performers in that sense.
Sure.
And I think that's an element that sometimes is very difficult in this industry. There's great analysts, but not great communicators. And if you can find people who do both well, I think they tend to kind of glob onto each other right away.
That's actually the most important next thing we'll jump to. But like I said, it was a little bit petty. But I had, you know, this experience of radio. I had done an internet radio show and I mean, you want to talk about going down is I did this for iHeartRadio because at the time I worked, it was for Clear Channel. I worked for Clear Channel and weirdly they couldn't stream football games because they don't have the rights to stream them on their website or their apps or when it was what was it, HD radio or whatever. So they needed content to be on the website. So they hired a bunch of us that were like board ops and stuff to do radio shows. So like I had this first experience of like my very first interview ever was Steve Lavin, you know, Coach Steve Lavin.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Great hair. And
not as good as yours, but great hair.
We talked about the Niners. It was great. So we did all this stuff. So that sparked that. So then push forward, Bogman and I, we have these crazy phone calls where the phone calls are just like the shows that you hear within this league right now, where we're busting each other's balls. We got jokes and we're doing bits and we're doing all this stuff, but we would intertwine it with listening to fantasy. And we did have one of those moments. I'd just be honest with you where, you know, I have my radio background, you know, we're funny-ish guys. You know, we're decent, you know, with fantasy, and we were listening to, I don't want to name the podcast, but we were listening to one, and it was a very popular one. And it was just one of these moments where it was just like, at the time, these guys didn't care about the audio quality. They didn't care. It was bad audio. And I'm talking, this is one of the major ones. They didn't care about the audio quality. Seemed like guys were sitting around talking into one microphone and they're kind of talking over each other. It's just a lot of stuff. And it was just like, we can do this. We can do fine at this. And that leads into the big crux of how do you do fine with it? Because we all have a moment like that where we're like, I can do this. I can be the person that builds this up if these people can. And that's why you see more and more upstart podcasts, upstart websites. But the key is finding ways to make sure that they're sustainable in this David versus Goliath situation, because everybody will inevitably find themselves in a spot where they're saying, holy crap, I'm putting in all this work and I'm not making money. And that's what we're about to talk about here. But do you have your moment of what finally pushed you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you know, like it's a little Larry David spite store in all of us, right? There's a little bit of spite. I think part of, for me too, for me, it was the creative outlet. I was having a lot of success in the corporate world and I hated it. I had hit the wall in an acting career that was very good for a very long time. But when you're like a 28-year-old character actor, there's not a whole lot for you. Like you're going on Boardwalk Empire auditions and reading against 40-year-old guys for the same part, and you're better than them. It doesn't matter because they're 40 and you're 28 and you just don't look that right on camera. So for me, it was I needed a creative outlet. So writing was something that I could control. So I liked doing that, and it was kind of keeping me sane. And then the book was, I think where I had the aha moment was where people responded to the book. Like I would look every day and it was like, oh, I sold 12 copies today. And oh, today's 22 copies. And the next, and it kept kind of going. And I knew there was a limit, but it seemed like it was a thing. And it was a thing enough where I said, hey, I can make this, between this other part-time job I took and I became a stay-at-home dad. I said, I can do this. I can try to take this book thing and do this other teaching job on the side and stay at home with my kids. So for me, it was an aha moment of out of necessity. It's like I could not be home with my kids and raise my kids, or I could try to do this and make it work and hustle. And I knew what it took to hustle and to make it work. And I figured I would just take that route. And the first book I wrote was while my oldest daughter, who turned 10 in February, while she napped and while I took my subway rides, my train rides, I should say, in from New York to New Jersey to teach every weekend. That's where the first Black Book and many other subsequent ones were written. I didn't have a staff of people. I did it all myself, 400 plus player profiles, all this crap. Crazy. I was out of my mind. But for me, Welsh, the necessity was the outlet more than anything. And then I got mad when I got stiffed for all the work I did for a year. And I said, you know what, screw this. I'm going to take it into my own hands. And it's amazing because every time I have had to rely more on me than like when FanDuel blew up and then blew up on itself. And then obviously subsequently came back and they got rid of all the content team in the meantime. That's when you rely more on yourself and you figure out these things. And the number of times I've been let go from companies is every single time. It's not because the work I do is bad. It's because, if the work I do is bad, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. It's because whenever you're relying on somebody else to write that check, you are beholden to their vision of things, but also their budget of things and what they're willing to commit to. And it's very difficult because, kind of like the acting world, fantasy sports is a world where everybody wants to get in it. So you can find a lot of people who are willing to work for free. And that is difficult because there's a lot of talented people out there who don't want to work for free, but I can find somebody who's, well, maybe 60, 70% of what you are. And I can go and I can pluck them and they can do it for free. And I'll have to pay you $50 or $75 an article or whatever it is. And that is a reality of this business, just like in the entertainment business. So many people are dying to get in it. They're willing to sacrifice so much. And it's very difficult then for people to make a living in it.
Yeah. Well, and I think then the key to talk about here, because you and I are yappers, we could just keep going about this, is actual keys to doing it, because it is going to be hard for everybody to, because there's a multitude of things here, man. You can also get a gig with some of the bigger places. There's the huge entities. And I think when we talk about this, people think about the full-timeness. Like, you're going to find gigs. There are fantastic people that are writing for Pitcher Lists that are also writing for Fangraphs, or, you might have USA Today and people stretch themselves out and maybe you can piecemeal something. But ultimately what happens if you are committed to this and you're going to put the effort of websites, you're going to put the effort of doing a podcast, and you want it to be something, maybe it is something more than a hobby, is you've got to put yourself in the right space. And there's a multitude of things that I think you need to understand to do it independently, because you can do it independently. Scott Bogman and we are not the most downloaded podcast, and I'll talk about this with podcasts here in a second, but we have successfully built something within this league that is very sustainable. And, Joe has done the same thing with publications. So there's three things. There's podcast, publications, and websites, but there is one thing that I think is very crucial in cultivating before any of these or with these things. And sometimes this comes after, and it is your personality. That's something that Nick and I talked about at the top, where we're joking about the wrong name thing, and that's a brand, that's your personality. And that's something that we were able, it's turned into a fun joke that we can kind of run with. But there's a multitude of ways to do it. I do it with my name. It's off-putting to some people. Some people it becomes kind of a shtick. It's easier to remember, the Welsh, Welsh. It's kind of a synonymous thing. But with whatever you're doing, if it's writing, if you're going to be building a website, especially if you're going to be podcasting, that you want to work through, and I think you've done a good job at it, I've tried to do a good job at it, is you need to cultivate your voice and your personality, because there's a unique situation that can happen here where we're talking about podcasts, we're talking about websites, we're going to talk about your book, but sometimes the brand is you, and more often than not, it is you. And when you've gotten to the point where either you have monetized or successfully put your brand, like, perfect example, someone I was going to ask to get on, but it's just, there's too much going on. My friend, Emily Walden, she is her own brand. She's a writer, and lots of people are out there writing and doing little stuff, but Emily is a brand, and she has done a good job at and putting herself in situations where she goes. It's not about like, hey, I'm Emily and I write for Baseball America, I write for The Athletic. It's like, no, guess what? Emily Walden is there. It's the same thing. Eno has done the same thing. Eno Saris is his own brand. Eno has cultivated that. That is a way that you can go, but it is very difficult. But it's also, it not only does it take time, there's an understanding of who you are and what your best traits and abilities are. And that is the most difficult thing people forget in this, is you get caught into the work that you're doing. You get caught into the muck. You're not making money. You're thinking about yourself compared to other people. And like with podcasting and air checking, you forget to check yourself and to make sure that you're cultivating it into whatever your strengths are, whether you're a goofy personality. Bogman and I wouldn't
I think it's authenticity, Welsh. Like, don't you think that's this was the best advice I could give anybody, and I'll reiterate at the end of the show is never do the show that you think other people want to hear. Do the show that you want to hear. I think that was the mistake that I made in the very beginning. I was trying to do, and that's a funny path too, because we talk about you and Bogman, being friends from high school. Same with me and Dan Strafford. Dan, professional radio guy, broadcasted at Rutgers, went to school for broadcasting. He got a little side thing at Sirius, co-hosting a show. After the book came out, he put me on, and I became like the regular Saturday night guest. And it was Mark Healy, a great friend of mine. And Mark eventually, after I did that show, then I was a guest host when Mark couldn't do it. And Dan and I were doing the show together. And Dan and I had been doing a podcast leading up to that out of his, side room, just like, we all start somewhere in like this weird room. And I remember when Sirius announced they were doing a channel for fantasy sports, we oh my God, we'd be so good at it. And they laughed at us and they said, no, who are you? You're nobody, go screw. And then 3 years later, we were on that network. So I think a lot of that is the mental aspect of it. And then eventually that show that Mark was hosting, he said, you don't want to do it anymore. They gave me the option, and I said, yeah, I'll do it, but I'll only do it if Dan can do it with me. And I think it's also that bond of pulling each other along. Like when I got offered to come go over to Fantrax for that time that we were over there, they said, who do you want to do a show with? And I said, there's only two guys. It's Bogman and Welsh. And those are the guys, because I have the rapport with them and I know instantly how good it's going to be. And we were right. And I feel like so much of this, there's a community in here, and knowing where you fit in it, but also realizing that you are going to pay dues and you're not going to get paid right away. And I worked at Sirius for years doing, eventually then Dan moved and I was doing that show solo from 10 to 1 a.m. Saturday nights. Nobody was calling me for 3 hours. Good people like Lenny Melnick would come on the show. Good people, would come on. And eventually I started to be on more shows. And then eventually Craig Mish stuck his neck out for me and said, hey, I'll do this Sunday show, but I want that guy to do it with me. And that was how I got paid. It took like 3 years for me to get paid. I was teaching till like 6 o'clock, staying in New York till 10 p.m. at night, doing that show, then till 1 o'clock, getting the last train back to New Jersey, sleeping for 3 hours and going back to work on Sunday the next morning. That's what I did for a couple years. And people don't understand, like, that's the kind of madness. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to sacrifice that and do that, then you should do it for a hobby, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to monetize it. It's not a competition.
And I think plenty of people do it for a hobby, but it comes up, and viability comes up, and hustle is a big important thing. Let's talk about the three big things and how you can kind of attack it, because all of these things, it's life advice, or giving life advice is like, and I think
these are helpful stories too, because I think people don't, they see us or they listen to us or they read us or whatever it is, but they don't really know the backstory to a lot of these things. And they just say, oh, well, you work in the industry. Well, yeah, I do now.
Yeah, well, that's always the best way to put it. And we've been here for a long time. Let's take podcasting here for a second. Yeah. This is kind of my key.
Yeah, let's do podcasts.
So Scott and I had done podcasting in 2009 and did it for a little bit, did it weird, blah, blah, blah. 2014 is when we start up in this league. And like I said before, in this league, we're not the most downloaded show. We do good numbers and stuff like that. But, obviously, Sleeper on the Buzz, Pitcher List, they're going to put up bigger numbers. But we have created ourselves from a podcast to be more viable, financially and sustainable through a lot of work and a whole lot of work. We started in 2014. And I want to talk about some of the keys for people if they're going to get into podcasting, what they should be doing. But, to your point, 6 months in, I was like, this is a lot of work. We were putting in 8-10 hours of multiple podcasts, and we would edit in clips. I mean, we're talking.
Oh yeah, you had so many drops and things. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that was what helped build the brand, by the way. And I had to hustle and figure out, get a deal with DraftKings, do this and this, and then finally, one of our big things. And if anyone has questions about it, they can pop it. Though Joe and I are going long. Is eventually you had to get outside the box, and you have to get creative, and that's what you have to do with all these things. Is you have to look inside yourself, and you have to find creativity to answer the questions that are biggest with you. And some people, it's like, hey, why am I not bigger? Some people, it's, hey, I'm putting so much time in this. Why am I not making money? And that was kind of one of ours. And that's where I built our Patreon. And we've been, I've got a Patreon that's 3+ years and almost 500 people, and that's sustainable. And that took a whole lot of work. But you're not going to get there, and you're not going to be able to sustain those fun things that you do from a podcast perspective for monetarily, unless you do it right. So and one of the things that pushed inside of me to want to, because I'm a podcaster. I'm not a great writer. I would probably do better and have more followers and all this crap if I was a better writer and I was more dedicated to it. But the spoken word is my thing. That's what I love to do. I actually personally love to edit. I love
and it shows through when you listen to an ITL pod or when you listen to you guys on Black Book with me. It shows there's a joy, and I used to always tell you this because when you're doing these things, you tend not to listen to other people, but I would always listen in this league because I'd be at the gym or something, or I'd be, out somewhere or traveling, and I would listen because you guys made me laugh. And it was not just good content, and you always had good guests, but you understood that you might go initially for the content, but you come back for the entertainment, you come back for the rapport. And you guys had such a unique one that was just, it's so palpable between you and Scott that I think there's no faking that. And I think that was so unique. And that's something that a lot of shows don't have. It's like just two people in a room talking, and that's not enough, unfortunately.
It's not. And that's what we needed to cultivate. So anybody that's out there thinking about because there's podcasts that start up left and right. And unfortunately, there's podcasts that end left and right. And we knew that, we had chops, and we were good with fantasy. I'm not Alex Chamberlain, I'm not a big smart guy, anything like that. But
you mean who writes for the Black Book now?
Yeah, exactly.
Who I employ?
Who you employ? Let's see. Now you're the big scumbag. You're the big scumbag.
But that's the whole point. Is like we're the and that's
somebody start a book and end Joe Pisapia.
That's our brand. It's like us being jerks. And that's
I did it.
I feel like that's like and that's so unique. You mentioned like you were the top when you were talking with Nick. Like if you can't kind of take that, that's what good friends do, is they make fun of each other to their face, and right away like you and I had that rapport. And you and Boggs have it, and I think that's kind of fun. It's like,
but see, that was what we needed to cultivate, and that's what, like I said, we had the chops to do fantasy. I had some of the wherewithal, and we needed that was the thing we figured out early is, listen, we can make people laugh and we can be entertaining, and we need to put this all together. So we started to do that, and the same thing can be said about the really talented writers. There's so many. Day in and day out, I see these amazing people. They're here on Pitcher List. They could be watching. They're out there that come up with these new cool things, but there'll be a lack of personality that's going with it. So what you need to do is you need to figure out, how do I take this great, amazing idea and turn it into a viable thing? So with podcasting, there's a couple keys that I think people need to do. If you want to build that thing where people will listen to you, where people will pay money, where people will want to follow you along. Like we have a rabid following, and it's a few key things. It's a few key things. One of the most important, I can't stress enough to anybody, is learn how to edit. Like the amount of people that start podcasts that are just like, well, I don't know what to do. It's the worst trait you could possibly have on the planet.
And you're going to do the audio volume, audio quality is
and that's part. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You should learn software. And a simple YouTube video, you can learn how to edit, because you should learn how to record, you should learn how to edit, and you should never put yourself in a situation where you're like, well, I don't know how to do that. It's not that hard. And it's one of the number one tricks. The thing that inspired me to podcast was quality, because quality was lacking. If I left the industry tomorrow, I'd like to think maybe one of the few things I've helped add and push people was to up their quality, because it was tin can garbage microphones. I felt like when I came in, and everybody has got better quality. So you should learn how to edit. You should get a good mic. And this is a radio thing. There's two radio things I would tell everybody, because I want to leave a little bit of time. We're going to go to the book here in a second. But two things you should do, that is my advice as someone that's been in radio for 15 years talking to you, is you should air check yourself. And people don't like to do that. And I'm not talking editing and listening. Air check yourself, because then you need to ask yourself a very important question. This is going to be the most important question you can ask yourself in the growth and the viability of your podcast long term. Is this something that I would listen to? And then you got to think bigger, because you're you, and you're just like, well, yeah, I'm amazing, and people are going to like me, and I'm smart, and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not what I'm saying. Is this something that you would really listen to? Do you enjoy the quality? Is it catching you enough? Are you not trying to speed through it? Are you disengaging? Air check yourself to make sure it's something that you would listen to. And then you can start to tackle all of the other elements of how do I make a podcast viable? I mean, how to monetize. I've got Joe. You can obviously go to advertising, which you can sell individually, which I've done before. You can go to agencies. You can create a Patreon like we've done. It is so much harder than you think.
It is. It's a lot of work, Patreon.
Yeah, because you've got to build the value in, and you have to build the pull where people want to see you. You can do like Picture List is done. It's kind of like a Patreon subscription service with Discords. There's so many ways you can up your value in podcasting where you don't need to get hired by the big guys to be sustainable. You can make it sustainable yourself, but you are you are the key. You are the core. You are the reason why it's going to be successful or not, and you can't get lost into it. Now, on the publication side,
one quick thing before we move to the publications is the the podcast thing too is, not everyone is built for that medium, and you have to recognize this. There's a lot of great writers. There's a lot of great podcasters. There's a lot of great TV personalities. There's very few people that travel in all of those circles. And number one, that's okay. You have to identify which ones you are. There's a lot of great writers that are terrible on air. And there's a lot of great on air people that don't have the best fantasy knowledge or sports knowledge necessarily, or think that they do. I think everybody to a certain extent always thinks that they're good or thinks that they're entertaining or whatnot. But I would caution everybody, send it to other people that you respect. Ask them. I can't tell you how many times people have sent me podcasts and said, hey, would you mind listening to this and give me your honest feedback? And I do, and I always do. And sometimes the honest feedback is honest to a fault. But I was very lucky early on. I had Steve Gardner. I remember I sent him an early copy of Relative Position Value in a chapter. And I said, I'd love your feedback. And not only did he give me feedback, he gave me notes. And he's, and I mean notes. Like it was a couple of pages of stuff of what I could do better, not just as a writer, and I was so grateful that he took the time to do that. And it's little things like that is, reach out to people you listen to, people you think are good at this, people that you respect in this world, and say, hey, do you mind taking a look? And then be open and honest about listening to their response, because they might not tell you what you want to hear, but they might tell you what you have to hear. And that's something you have to kind of man or woman up about and figure out that it's okay to have someone tell you, this is good, this is bad, you need to fix this, blah, blah, blah. And I think you can grow a lot. And there are people like Steve and like myself. I don't know if Welsh will listen. He probably won't. He's a jerk. But I mean, maybe he will listen and tell you, what you can improve on. And I think that's something that's always good to reach out to people.
Yeah, I've done it a lot of times. And, finding out what you offer from the industry that's better is a big key. It's just self-realization across the board. That's why I'm saying, air checking is bigger than just listening. Air check, by the way, means like going back and listening to your episode. It's more than that. And it's finding your niche and making sure you cultivate that the best as possible. Because Joe, you did something very unique. You're in a space from a publication side where there is you want to talk about David versus Goliath, podcast. Sure. My podcast versus, I was honored when In This League beat Roto World in the podcast tournament. Pitcher List ends up winning the whole thing. But this is a different animal when you get into publications, because when you decide to go to this venture, we don't have a ton of time here because I want to bring Nick on, but like, you did something unique. You found your niche, you found your voice, and you found the way to market a Probably the hardest thing of all of these is to become a #1 fantasy selling book when you've got, Ron Chandler's book, you've got baseball. You have so many books out there that are talking baseball and talking fantasy. You did something unique where you created a job out of a publication, and now you're 10 years in, and the book is released right now today.
That's right. New football books. It is right behind me there. New football book.
Yeah, baseball is out. Football just released.
Baseball's been out.
So in like 4 or 5 minutes, real quick, like what are the keys? What are the keys to doing
keys? The first key was relentlessness. #1. There's an enormous amount of work. The ability to communicate well what your concepts are, because what I was trying to do with the Black Book was something unique and different. And the spin I was trying to give was, look, everybody out there is getting the same stuff. Here's something different. Here's the Black Book. Here's something that's that I'm going to offer you that is not like all the other ones. And it might change how you see things, and you might never want to go back. And the most incredible part about it is we've never had a major entity behind it, not once. There's no investors behind the Black Book. It's not that it's just me and then eventually a bunch of my friends along with me. And my ability to go to people like Paul Sporer, my people like Jake Seeley, people who have helped me grow the brand so exponentially over the years, and saying, hey, come contribute to this with me. And I work on a structure with some writers where they get paid flat, but the writers who I work with a higher profile, I offer them deals. And I said, look, I can make 100% of this small pie, or I can make, X number percent of the large pie. And that is much more exciting to me. And not only that, I get to work with great people and bring them in. And I've been very lucky. Tim Heaney, couldn't do it. The staff of people that I have every year, and people who say, I want to write for the Black Book, is crazy. But so much of that was community. So much of that was people letting me go on and talk about it, and me being able to communicate my ideas and my vision of what it was, and at least engender a little bit of curiosity about, well, what is the Black Book? And not only number one in fantasy sports, but it's nuts because the last couple of years we were number one in baseball books. We were number one in football books. Like when Joe Namath's new book came out last year, we were ahead of it. Like when Tom Brady TB12 in August, for 3 weeks, we were ahead of TB12 on Amazon. That's ludicrous, right? Like that should never be the case. But I think there's something in this day and age where I'm very lucky in the space, because when you're direct to consumer like we are, we're able to change things and update stuff where other publications, once they go to press, that's it. We can make adjustments to the book. So if you buy the book later on, we have that ability to make changes in player profiles or changes in rankings and whatnot. RPV is something different if people are having success with it because it works. And at the end of the day, if you're not giving a quality product, it's going to die. It's not going to die a slow death. It's going to die a very, very fast death. So you have to be committed to the product. You have to be committed about how good you can make it. And also you have to be sure that you are giving someone a real alternative. Because if you're just doing rankings, you're just doing the same stuff everybody else is, it's not going to cut it. It's not going to be good enough. And you have to have a collective vision. You have to have a lot of help from your friends, and you have to be dedicated enough to fail and then learn from those failures and be honest with yourself. And then eventually, like, it is always staggering to me that Black Book right now is my main source of income. Like my family lives on that. Yeah. Me, my 2 kids. I am a single father of 2 daughters, and we live on that. Am I living in a mansion? No. Do I have a decent house? Yeah. Do we go on a vacation once a year? Yeah. And that's great. Like there's more to this. That's awesome. Like I'd love to see that. That'd be terrific. But there's so much blood, sweat, and tears and so much time that goes into it. This is the 10th year of the brand, and it's come so far, but also it's developed so far. Amazon being able to put out a paperback version of it changed the game for me, because I didn't have to go to an individual publishing house. I didn't have to cut a deal where they're taking a ton of money to print it and all these things, and then I get X number of dollars. I am the sole proprietor of it. I go to Amazon. This is my thing. I get a percentage. They take a cut. You have to understand too, your budgets, like how much paper cost is, how much all these things are. And you have to kind of go in there and say, well, where am I profitable with this book? And can I afford to have other people write it with me? And, I know our good friend Justin Mason has ventured into that in the last couple of years, and he's kind of realizing those same things.
Successful books, Joe. Very unsuccessful.
But it's so much of it is timing. So much of it is the relentless promotion of it. But so much of it is also, what are you doing in the space that's unique that people can, it's more than want. It's almost need. It's like, I need the Black Book. And for me, how can I improve it every single time? Like Bogman's contributions are exponentially important. And I know we're going to get to Nick here, but like, I can't stress this enough. Like every single year I go, okay, that was good. How can I make it better now? And I never stop thinking about how I can make the Black Book better. And as long as I don't stop thinking about it, I think people will always be happy with the product when they get it in their hand.
Yeah. Sorry. Joe. So let me say, Joe, it gets tropey, and it's okay for it to be tropey. That the biggest keys to a lot of this stuff is find uniqueness, hustle, and build and don't be scared to do stuff. And it's a mountain that you're climbing. And Nick, why don't you come on here, because Nick is climbing, I think, the biggest mountain of all of them. I mean, we're also, it's very just open conversation. This probably could go on a lot longer. And, where's the helpfulness to all of you that are listening? I don't know. You're going to go and hear amazingly smart people talk about ridiculously awesome baseball stuff in PitchCon, which this is all about. But in my eyes, there's this bigger overarching thing as I see new podcasts pop up. I see people attempt books. I've done it. And you see websites pop up all the time. And Nick, you are, I pub you a lot because I think very, very highly of you. And I think highly, and not just because I'm here, but like what you've done is I think, not the word admirable is not the right word, but it's something that people should strive for, because what Joe has done in the publication standpoint is incredibly unique. I really shouldn't even be talking about this because I'm not doing anything unique. I'm not blowing listens out of the water, but I have built as someone said in there, a cultivating a cult-like audience that I know how to make entertainment and I know how to make some money on this. But you are tackling maybe the biggest mountain of all of these, in that you're doing a website, you have writers. It is literally what I see everybody try to do, but so many are unsuccessful at it. And somehow you have turned the corner into turning Pitcher List into not just like a viable website, but you are going to be one of the big dogs someday. And I've told you this before, you are going to be one of the big dogs, and I'll be sitting here unemployed, unsuccessful, being like, man, hopefully I wish I was like cool and stuff. No, I'm telling you. And you are going to be the next big site that in 10 years, people are like, Jesus, I wish I could get on and be a part of Pitcher List. So just throw out some of the keys. I know we've kind of rambled and a lot of talk here, but like, what were the things that needed to go into Pitcher List in your eyes to make a website on your own successful? It's the biggest, craziest mountain to hurdle.
Well, the first thing I did was to not hate on myself so much. I'm not going to let you do that anymore, Welsh.
That's my brand.
No, get out of here. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it. It's so not true and false, and it's just wrong. So stop that. You're incredible. You're fantastic at what you do. And even when you guys are talking
whatever
about
that is
quality, the quality of your podcast. I mean, I'm actually even noticing, I think you actually have a different mic right now, because you normally have the RE20.
Yeah, I do have the RE20.
Oh, we're all going to take our mics out now. I think this has officially gone downhill. Everyone take your mics out. Let's compare the size of the mics.
Saying, this is better for video, but yes, I do have the RE20. No big deal. I do like.
I mean, it's something actually I remember jumping into the whole thing, like how I was like, right, I need to sound better with mics and stuff. I was like, how do I sound like the Welsh? Just because I can, and it doesn't surprise me, of course, I use like the premier mic of the RE20. I don't know. I mean, it's been like 6 years now, and I will say this: we've had so many setbacks along the way that could easily have just been like, all right, that's it. And I think the element of like creating something like this, and you guys will certainly know, is that it is not. A lot of it is really not fun.
Not fun. It's so not
really.
Fun.
It's like people have this dream of like, oh, cool, you have an idea, and it's just going to go magically happen, and there are so many nights, and like you're going to work more than you should. Right? Like, you want a proper work-life balance and stuff. Like, well, this is not the thing to do. It's insane. And I mean, I can't imagine. Like, I understand that I can do it myself. Like, I love this so much, and I'm so passionate about that I can drive past it. The problem that is always for me is I always feel there's so many people that are also so driven that work with us at PitchCon, and I'm always so shocked by it, because I can ask myself to to work hard and stuff, but others that do it too, I'm like, well, man, you should have a proper work-life balance and stuff. And so I'm always so appreciative of those that go that extra mile. But yeah, there's so many things along the way that is just going to make things bad, and you're going to really be, I think, also worried about putting something out that isn't exactly as you want it. Absolutely. And what I say to that is, it does not matter. Like, just get things out there. It will never be perfect. I look at the site now and I think, okay, there are things that I want to do better already. And there's always going to be another goal to hit. Just keep things going and don't worry too much about this one moment, because there are going to be so many more other moments and moving forward.
Nick just hit on a really important thing too, which is a lot of people can start something and not a lot of people can finish it. If you finish something, like I remember finishing the first Black Book, and I remember knowing just finishing it, I was already ahead of 90% of everybody else, because I finished it, because I put it up there and it was done. And you know what? like Nick said, am I happy with it? Probably not. I look back on it. If I went back and looked at that first book, I'd be like, this guy's an idiot. What's wrong with you? You're a moron. But it's the two things. It's never being satisfied with the product, always wanting to make the thing you're doing better, and finishing. Like Welsh is saying, it's like, look, any moron can start a podcast, because look, I have one. But at the same time, it's like, can you finish it? And you do need help from your friends, and you do need all these things. And I didn't start out writing the book to think, oh, I'm going to be a TV host someday, like I do now. And that the focus never got that far. The focus should always be, what can I do today to make this better? Like Nick is saying, what can I do to make my life better and my product better? And I think if you're always like just hyper focused on that, then eventually those other opportunities do present themselves, and some will be great. Some will appear great at the time and then not be great. And then others will be awful. And hopefully you get some good opportunities along the way, but to narrow that focus of what can I control, and really focus on that, because I think what Nick's hitting on is really crucial. It's like Welsh is so into, what does the podcast sound like? What does it feel like? What's the imaging of the show? All that stuff. It's so he cares so much about it. He's so hyper focused. Nick is so hyper focused on the way Pitcher List runs, and understanding the kind of content and how they want it to look and how they want it to feel and how they want it to read. And if you continuously work like that, I always feel like then no one can stop you except you. That's my.
And I want to throw in, look at the people that have popped up in the industry recently that are finding success. I know we're coming to like a kind of a close here, but my dear friend Justin Mason started when we all kind of started together, and Justin just said, I'm going to do something unique. And he created, TGFBI, Pitcher List. We're doing a 4-day conference online. This is unique. This is complete. Bogman and I, we said, we're going to do something that no one's doing in podcasting. Guess what? We're going to make you laugh. We're going to do something that, maybe you've heard on other, radio shows and stuff. We're going to do clips. We're going to try to be unique. And, the best way I can think to end this is someone that I love dearly in the industry, even though we're not like great friends. Not that we're not friends, but I don't talk to him on a regular basis. But everybody, it's my best advice to everybody. Everybody should, like, as you guys have both kind of said, surround yourself with the right people. Nick uniquely does this, which I just can't let go, that Nick has surrounded himself with all of the really, really right people to be successful. And and you can't do everything.
I don't know how, but they did. And I feel so, asked me that email like 4 years ago. That was just like the best email I've ever gotten, is what I say. Yeah. Because I just got, how did I get Alex Fast? I don't know. But I
tried to get Nick Pollock this year for the Black Book, and he told me to go screw.
I
was like, hey, I'm assembling the Avengers. I'm assembling the Avengers for the new Black Book. I was like, hey, I love what you're doing. I'd love for you to have a platform. He's like, no, you know what? Screw you, Joe Pisapia. I'm going to go make my own platform, and I respect that a great deal. So I'm bringing it up because, number one, it's funny, but number two,
I got Nick for my book though.
I was doing all 30 pictures of the for the Pitcher List guide, and I wound up doing like 15 maybe, and I had to bring in Michael Oggetto at the end, like, Michael Oggetto, I need your help, just like because I can't get it done. But the whole point you would have experienced probably more.
But I would have experienced, but I did experience in actuality in real life is somebody saying, I'm good. I appreciate that. That's cool, but thanks, I'm good because I'm doing this. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? Next year I might ask you again, and you can still tell me to piss off, because I think what happens is when I recognize the same thing in other people that I saw, that I thought was going to make me successful, which is that independent spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit that you can say, I'm going to do this, whether I'm going to somehow find a way to make it work. And you know what? I've always tried to, like Nate Hamilton, like Kate Magic, who we have writing for the football book this year. We have so many great people this year who I feel like these up and coming voices in some of these fantasy communities that don't work for the big box yet, but I think someday they might. And it's so cool because it's like, I want to give them the platform that nobody gave me, that I had to carve out for myself. Yeah. And that, to me, I will always want to stay Black Book because it's independent. And of all the jobs I've ever taken, the one thing in every negotiation is I'm not giving this up because this is mine and I own this and it's me.
And the same thing had happened with me. You know, in this league played a big role in me not being able to push into maybe doing those other opportunities that I've talked about. But I just want to finish with the last thing I was saying is, you know, we've talked about, you know, so many tropey type of things that we all know. You know, guess what? Hard work, it's going to go a lot of ways. Guess what? Hustle, it's going to go really far. Surrounding yourself with the right people and knowing what you're good and not good at is so important. That's probably something that Bogman and I have lacked, is we're so just us that, you know, finding the right other people to do the things we lack in. But as I was saying before, there's one guy that I'm not like necessarily great friends with, but I appreciate him and I talk to him when I can. And I think he's a pillar of the industry and he's someone that can give you advice and he can be there for you, is Nando DeFino. Nando DeFino has been everywhere. He's done everything. He's created opportunities for people. And something he said, and he's popped out before, and this is all I'm regurgitating here in how I feel, is that you should create yourself and make yourself a Swiss Army knife as much as possible. If you're going to podcast, learn that there is nothing stopping you, that you can edit, you can record, you can get equipment. Don't let things stop you. The same thing with a website. Nando wouldn't necessarily speak to that, but there are ways to find, there are ways to avoid the roadblocks. The same thing with a book. You know, Bogman and I did a book. I joke about it being unsuccessful. It was actually a completely cool and unique concept. It just was so much work for us, different from what we did, but we strive for creativity and we didn't let anything stop us. We wrote a book. We're idiots. Why would we write a book? We did that thing and we did it pretty cool. And we ended up finding some people to help us. So all I say is that your dream doesn't have to be to work for ESPN or for CBS or even for USA Today. Your dream doesn't have to be that it's full-time in one single place. Your dream can be that you create yourself as a brand that is more sustainable enough to feed these cool things that are available to us. And if you do it right, and you know you can't be blocked, and you find your angle and your creativity, you can be successful in whatever success is. I'm not necessarily successful, but we do make money in the fantasy industry, which is like the top 5% of what people are striving to do. Joe, he makes a living writing a book against all of the big books. And guess what? Pitcher List, Nick Pollock, and their entire crew are one of the most up-and-coming websites. They have a 4-day conference, and they're doing good. This is literally here to help and to like feed people. This is they're doing something that most don't do because they can, because they've cultivated a crew around them. And I've said cultivate 4 million times. So if you're
hashtag cultivate, my
right
God.
Now, all I'm saying is these are examples of ways that you can do it yourself. It is very, very possible. And hopefully some of the rambling of all of this isn't a great presentation with slides and stuff like that. These are talkers and stuff. Hopefully
this is a truth presentation. This is a conversation presentation. We're telling you the truth. We don't have any slides. There's no PowerPoint here. It's the power of in here. See, that's what I did there.
All right. So really quickly at the end, one really great point about you can pretty much learn anything online. Like I learned GIFs like online. I wanted to do that. There must be a way the internet will teach me.
There's I learned video editing. I learned video editing on YouTube.
Exactly. Don't let any of that kind of stuff get in your way. That's a really, really great point. The other one I just really wanted to say really quickly before we ended it, you made a great point about listening to yourself on podcasting and what you should listen to. And if you enjoy it, right? Because I think all of us will say here, if you're in the business of being correct in fantasy baseball, you're doing it wrong. Like if that's the thing that you're known 100%. For, I mean, Jake can do it. Jake's Steely, fine. But for the rest
he makes a business of being wrong, Jake. Yeah. I mean, have you seen his Damian Williams takes from last year?
Well, that's what I'm getting at, though, is that if that's how you think you're going to define yourself, whether you're just doing this the wrong way, you have to do it so that, you know, it's the conversation, it's the discussion, and you've got to talk about it the right way. That's
it's entertainment. Fantasy sports is entertainment.
Exactly. So if you hold on
to our sports entertainment that we create for ourselves.
So you have to have the smallest ego, because you're going to be wrong a whole lot. You're going to have a lot of people saying that you're wrong, and those that care about that, well, you have to be like, well, that's not what I'm trying to do here. I mean, yes, I'm obviously trying to be right, but I'm doing this because I enjoy it and because it's entertainment, exactly as you said it. So don't think about putting out the right information, which you should, but that's not what it should make you. It's about how you discuss it, how you're writing it, how you're saying it to everybody, how you're tweeting it, all that kind of stuff. That's the important part that you should be focusing on a lot.
Yeah.
So
it's a great point. It's a really, really great point. And I hope people take it. And I hope it was helpful a little bit. Like I said, this is a deviation from a lot of what these amazing dudes are doing. And people are getting to dive into some really, really deep stuff. But I know there's a lot of people out there that are, you know, starting up these things and they end it and just, you know, bust your ass and don't allow yourself any roadblocks and keep at it. And this group right here, we have done all of this for no less than 5 years. So, you know what you're in for. And none of us are necessarily crazy successful. We're all different degrees of something here. But this is cool stuff, Nick. I hope this was helpful to, you know, everybody listening to PitchCon.
Really, thank you guys both so much for being a part of this.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks for having us. Good cause.
And thank you guys again.
Bye.